There is a truth so profound, so moving, so comforting about the spiritual world that the Church, under the guardianship of Archangel Michael, has revealed throughout the centuries, and that can completely change the way you deal with longing, with the pain of loss, with grief, especially when this pain tightens even more during Christmas time. A truth that connects heaven and earth in a way that very few people know. The Church invokes Archangel Michael as a defender in combat, a protector in hours of darkness, and a guide for souls at the time of judgment. It is in the light of this mission that you will understand what happens with the tears you shed at Christmas. At this very moment, as you watch this video, millions of souls in heaven and purgatory are feeling something extraordinary related to the tears their loved ones shed for them here on earth, especially when these tears fall at Christmas, before the tree, the nativity scene, or during Mass. In the next few minutes, in the shadow of Archangel Michael's luminous sword, you will discover exactly what happens in the spiritual world when you cry for someone who has passed away, and what the soul feels when you cry for it at Christmas. You will understand why your tears are not in vain. You will learn that every tear has a power and a meaning you never imagined. And you will find a deep comfort that only this truth, guarded by God's angels, can bring. If you have lost someone you love deeply, if you still cry for that person's absence, if at Christmas the empty seat at the table hurts you and you wonder if those tears reach them, prepare your heart, because what you are about to discover under the gaze of Archangel Michael will move and comfort you in a way you have never experienced. Before we begin, I need you to do something important. Write in the comments the name of someone who has passed away and for whom you still cry, especially at Christmas, saying, Archangel Michael, I now know that name feels my tears, especially this Christmas. And leave that like if you believe that love is stronger than death and that our tears, including those shed at Christmas, connect our heart to the heart of those who have passed away. If you are not yet subscribed, subscribe now, because this channel is bringing profound spiritual truths that, under the protection of Archangel Michael, comfort and strengthen thousands of hearts every day. Now, take a deep breath, place your hand over your heart, and let's together enter into this extraordinary revelation, guarded by angels and confirmed by saints and mystics, about tears and the souls of the deceased. It was the year 1963. A woman named Carmela had lost her only son, a boy of just 8 years old, in a tragic accident shortly before Christmas. The pain was so profound, so devastating, that Carmela spent entire days crying. She cried upon waking, she cried upon remembering, she cried upon seeing her son's clothes. The text, she cried upon looking at the sky, and when she saw the Christmas lights in the streets, she cried even more. Her tears seemed endless. The people around her told her to stop crying, that there was no point in crying, that she needed to be strong, that at Christmas she should be at peace, but she couldn't. And deep in her heart, a question tormented her. Does my son know I am crying for him? Does he feel my tears, especially when I cry at Christmas, or am I crying alone without him knowing? Have you ever asked yourself that same question? Have you ever looked at the Christmas tree or the nativity scene and, in silence, wondered if that person who passed away knows you still cry for them? Desperate for answers, Carmela traveled to a place that, for centuries, has been linked to the mission of Archangel Michael, the sanctuary dedicated to him and also to San Giovanni Rotondo, where a saint deeply devoted to Saint Michael, Padre Pio, attended to crowds. She wanted to hear something from heaven. In the confession line, she waited for hours. When she finally entered the confessional, even before she said anything, that priest, marked by visions of the spiritual world and who had an ardent devotion to Archangel Michael, fixed her with a penetrating gaze, like someone who sees beyond the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds, and said, "Your son knows. He feels every tear. And more than that, he feels it even more intensely when you cry at Christmas. Your tears have a power you cannot imagine." At that moment, Carmela did not just hear the voice of a priest. It was as if, behind those words, Archangel Michael himself was present, messenger of God's justice and mercy, allowing her to know what happens to souls when someone cries for them. Carmela began to cry even more intensely, but now they were different tears. They were tears of relief, of hope, of connection. The accounts tell that in this spiritual direction, it was explained to Carmela, in detail, what happened in the spiritual world every time she cried for her son. And it was shown to her how the tears of a mother, of a father, of a child, of anyone who truly loves, create a spiritual bridge between heaven and earth. There, under the mantle of Archangel Michael, she heard that, at the exact moment a tear rolls down the face of someone crying for a deceased person, something extraordinary happens in the spiritual dimension. The soul of the deceased receives a kind of celestial notification, if we can call it that. It is as if a light turns on in heaven with that person's name, signaling that someone on earth is crying for them at that moment. And when this tear is shed at Christmas time, before a nativity scene, an illuminated tree, or during Mass, this light shines even more, as if it were enveloped by the very light of the child Jesus and guarded under St. Michael's gleaming sword. The Church, reflecting the experience of many saints and devotees of Archangel Michael, teaches that the instant you begin to cry for someone, that person's soul receives a spiritual awareness of that crying. It is not a physical awareness, of course, for they no longer have a body, but it is a deep spiritual awareness. The soul feels, "He is crying for me, she is crying for me, I have not been forgotten, I am still loved." And if this crying happens at Christmas, the soul perceives even more intensely. They are suffering this night when everyone celebrates. I need to be spiritually closer to them. And this awareness generates a powerful reaction in the soul. If the soul is in purgatory, those tears bring immediate relief to its pains. If the soul is already in heaven, those tears bring a special joy, because they confirm the love that still exists between those who remained and those who departed, even separated by death. Carmela asked, her voice choked, "But everyone says I shouldn't cry." That crying is a lack of faith, that crying is not accepting God's will, especially at Christmas. Am I wrong to cry so much? And the answer, inspired by the wisdom of the Church and the experiences of so many saints devoted to St. Michael, was so beautiful, so profound, that it changed not only Carmela's life, but that of many who later heard teachings like this. God never condemns tears of love. Jesus cried for Lazarus. Jesus cried for Jerusalem. Tears are the language of the heart. When you cry for your child, including at Christmas, you are saying without words, "I love you, I miss you, you were important to me." And these tears are precious in the eyes of God. They are not a sign of lack of faith, but of deep love. Cry, yes, cry as much as you need to cry, because every tear of yours is a prayer, it is a bridge, it is a connection. And Archangel Michael, who accompanies souls in judgment and defends them before God, knows and guards these tears. Have you ever felt guilty for crying too much, especially on dates like Christmas, as if you were failing in faith? Perhaps today you are discovering that God looks at your tears with much more tenderness than with judgment, and that Archangel Michael presents them before him as a silent plea of love. The Church, in light of what so many saints and mystics lived under the protection of St. Michael, also teaches something that very few people know. There are different types of tears, and each type has a different effect in the spiritual world. There are tears of love and longing, which are the purest and most powerful. These tears, when shed for someone who has passed away, have the power to relieve the pains of the soul in purgatory, to bring comfort to those who cry, and to strengthen the spiritual connection between the living and the dead. They are holy tears, tears that God collects as precious pearls. Scripture itself says that God keeps our tears in His wineskin. He values them, preserves them, lets none be wasted. But the saints and exorcists who entrust themselves to Archangel Michael also warn about another type of tears. Tears of despair, of revolt, of lack of faith. When someone cries, but cries with anger at God, blaming God for death, cursing life, these tears bring no comfort either to those who cry or to the soul of the deceased. In fact, they disturb. The soul sees the person it loves destroying themselves in despair and feels anguish. The faith of the Church teaches that the soul of the deceased, especially if already in heaven, deeply desires that their loved ones have peace, accept God's will, continue living with hope. When the soul sees someone sinking into revolt because of it, this causes a spiritual sadness, even in heaven. And at Christmas, when the soul sees the family gathered around the table, but someone closes themselves off in despair, the pain is felt even more spiritually. Therefore, devotees of Saint Michael teach that the correct crying, the holy crying, is that which mixes longing with faith, pain with hope, tears with prayer. It is the crying of one who says, "I miss you, but I know you are with God. I cry because I love you, but I accept the divine will. I suffer from the absence, but I trust that we will meet again." This type of crying is powerful in the spiritual world. These tears have the power to heal, to connect, to transform, and Saint Michael, defender of souls, knows each one of them. The saints also speak, under the patronage of Saint Michael, of what happens when you cry for a soul in purgatory. They say that your tears are transformed into a celestial dew that falls upon that soul, relieving the purifying fire. It is not just a figure of speech, it is presented as a spiritual reality. Tears of love shed on earth have a correspondence in purgatory. They refresh, comfort, relieve. Every tear shed with true love shortens that soul's time in purgatory. Crying for the dead is not only allowed, it is beneficial. It is a very powerful form of suffrage. In mystical accounts of saints under the protection of Saint Michael, there is talk of souls that were suddenly enveloped by a soft and refreshing mist. When they asked the angels what it was, the answer was, "They are the tears of love that your loved ones are shedding for them at this moment on earth." These souls raised their eyes to heaven, made gestures of gratitude, and some even smiled amidst the suffering, because they knew they were not forgotten, that they were still loved. And this knowledge was, in itself, immense relief. And when these tears were shed at Christmas, many mystics said that it seemed as if the celestial dew came mixed with light, as if the child Jesus and Archangel Michael together touched those souls with special tenderness. But perhaps the most extraordinary thing is what the faith of the Church, in light of Archangel Michael's mission, teaches about what happens when you cry for a soul already in heaven. Many think, if the soul is already in heaven, it is in full happiness. My tears make no difference. But it is not so. Souls in heaven are not indifferent to the tears of their loved ones. On the contrary, when you cry for someone who is already in heavenly glory, that soul often receives a special permission from God to spiritually approach you at that moment. It is as if, through tears, you create a bridge that allows the soul to descend to you, not physically, but spiritually, to comfort you. Many devotees report that, when they are crying for someone who has passed away, and suddenly feel an inexplicable peace invading their heart, an invisible hand on their shoulder, a warm presence around them, it is not just imagination, it is the soul for whom they cry, who received permission from God, often through the intercession of Saint Michael, to make itself spiritually present at that moment and comfort. And perhaps you have already experienced this, even without realizing it. The whole family gathered, the table set, the smell of dinner throughout the house. Voices mixed, laughter trying to fill a space that no one admits is empty. And suddenly, someone discreetly gets up from the table, goes into the room or onto the balcony, slowly closes the door, and lets fall the tear they held back all day so as to spoil the mood. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever had to hide in the bathroom during Christmas dinner to cry for someone who is no longer there? The saints devoted to Archangel Michael said that it is precisely in that solitary tear on that concrete Christmas night that something luminous happens in the spiritual dimension. It is as if that tear, hidden from human eyes, shines before God with even greater intensity. The soul for whom you cry feels this light. It perceives, "He still thinks of me. She still loves me. I have not been forgotten on this night when everyone celebrates." And according to many spiritual accounts, when this consciousness awakens in the soul, God frequently allows it to approach the one who cries, not to increase the pain, but to envelop the person in a silent, deep, and real comfort. And Archangel Michael, as guardian of the passage between heaven and earth, accompanies and protects this movement of love. Tears are the channel, the bridge, the spiritual meeting point between you and the soul you love. There are countless testimonies in sanctuaries dedicated to Saint Michael and in places of prayer where people recount such experiences. A lady crying in the cemetery over her husband's grave suddenly feels an invisible embrace so real that she swears her husband was there. Priests say, God permitted it. It was his soul approaching to comfort. Another case, a father crying for his deceased daughter, who suddenly smells her perfume intensely and unexpectedly. Again, the spiritual explanation. It was her soul sending a small sign, permitted by God, to say that she is well, is near, feels his tears. So, if you are crying for someone who has passed away, at any time or especially this Christmas, know, your tears do not fall into emptiness. They reach that soul. They create a connection. They have power. Do not repress your tears thinking it is weakness or lack of faith. Cry. Cry with love, with faith, with hope. And every tear will be like a love letter sent from your heart to the heart of the soul you love, presented before God by Archangel Michael. The Church also tells us about the difference between crying in the first moments after a loss and crying that persists for years. In the first days, weeks, and even months after the death of a loved one, crying is natural, expected, and even necessary. It is the process of grief. It is the soul of the person who remained adjusting to the new reality. This crying has an immense power of suffrage for the soul that departed. Every tear shed in this initial period is like a mass, like an intense prayer, like a powerful spiritual offering. The soul immensely benefits from these initial tears. But many saints and good confessors remember, under the gaze of Saint Michael, that crying that never ends, that becomes unhealthy and paralyzes life, needs to be transformed. There comes a time when crying must become more serene, more peaceful. It is possible to feel longing without despair. It is possible to remember with tears, but also with smiles. It is possible to love those who have departed without destroying oneself because of their absence. This mature love, this serene longing, is even more beautiful in the eyes of God and more comforting for the soul than desperate crying. That is why many spiritual directors recommend a beautiful practice. Whenever you feel like crying for someone who has passed away, instead of just crying, transform the crying into prayer. Cry, yes, but pray at the same time. Say, Lord, I offer these tears for the soul of Name. May every tear be a prayer for him. May every tear relieve his pains if he is in purgatory, or increase his glory if he is already in heaven. I cry because I love. I cry because I trust in you. Archangel Michael, present these tears before God and take care of the soul I love. In this way, you completely transform the nature of crying. From a pain that could be just suffering, it becomes also prayer, suffrage, and powerful spiritual connection. And if you do this especially on Christmas night, before the nativity scene, this prayer becomes an even more beautiful spiritual gift. Another profound revelation that the Church offers us is about the collective power of tears. When an entire family cries for someone who has passed away, when several people shed tears for the same soul, the effect in the spiritual world is multiplied. It is as if the tears unite and form a river of graces that descends upon the benefited soul. It is as if, from heaven, a single current of light is seen descending upon that soul every time someone, in different places, cries for it. The more people cry with love for a soul, the more it is relieved, comforted, and spiritually strengthened. Therefore, it is not shameful to cry at wakes and Seventh-day Masses. On the contrary, that collective crying has incalculable spiritual value. And when this crying happens at a Christmas Mass, at a dinner where everyone remembers those who have departed and cries together, this river of graces becomes even stronger. It is not a time to pretend to be stone. It is a time to let the tears flow, because they do an immense good to the soul for whom one cries. And Archangel Michael, who leads souls to the presence of God, is not indifferent to this. The saints also speak much of children and their tears. When a child loses someone and cries, even without fully understanding what death is, these tears have a special power in the spiritual world. The child's innocence, the purity of their love, make those tears even more precious in the eyes of God. The soul that receives a child's tears feels deeply touched, because it recognizes a disinterested and pure love. There are accounts of visions where a grandmother, in purgatory, was suddenly enveloped by a soft light, and her face lit up with tranquil joy. It was revealed that, at that exact moment, her 5-year-old granddaughter had cried for her in the cemetery, placing flowers on the grave and saying, "Grandma, I love you, I miss you." These childlike tears intensely relieved the pains of that soul. How many times does this not happen near Christmas? When a child misses the grandmother who made dinner or the grandfather who set up the nativity scene. If you have small children who have lost someone, do not prevent them from crying. Do not tell them they need to be strong. Let them express their pain, their longing, their tears. These tears do immense good to the soul of the departed and help the child themselves to grieve in a healthy way. Many saints and spiritual directors also speak of a mysterious connection between tears and dreams. Often, after someone cries intensely for a deceased person, that person dreams of them that same night or in the following days. And frequently, in these dreams, the deceased appears thanking, comforting, saying that they are well. These spiritual authors teach that these are not just psychological dreams, but to a large extent, spiritual visits permitted by God. Moved by the tears it received, the soul asks permission to appear in a dream and comfort. Have you ever had such a vivid dream with someone who has passed away, especially on nights like Christmas, that upon waking it seemed more like an encounter than a simple dream? Perhaps it was not just your mind. Perhaps it was an answer to your tears, welcomed by God under the guardianship of Archangel Michael. Therefore, if you cried a lot for someone and then dreamed of that person, pay attention. If the dream was vivid, clear, left a deep mark, it may have been more than a dream, a real spiritual encounter, permitted by God, facilitated by your tears. Many saints also speak of tears of joy for the deceased. Not every tear needs to be of sadness. It is possible, and even recommendable, to cry from emotion and gratitude when you remember happy moments with that person. Tell funny stories. Laugh until you cry from good longing. When you see something beautiful and think, "He would have loved to see this," and tears stream down. The tears of joy mixed with longing are also precious. They create spiritual connection and bring even more joy to the soul in heaven. Holy souls rejoice when their loved ones remember them with gratitude, not just with sadness. When you can say, "I miss you, but what a blessing it was to have you in my life. I cry, but these are tears of gratitude for every moment we lived." This feeling, even with tears, is beautiful in the eyes of God and fills with joy the soul that already contemplates His face. Another profound thing that Christian faith teaches us: unshed tears. There are people who lose a loved one and refuse to cry, out of pride, fear, emotional blockage, or need to appear strong. They keep everything inside. This is not healthy spiritually or emotionally. Tears need to come out. If you don't cry, you are not being strong, you are hurting yourself. And the soul of the deceased also perceives it. It is as if it sees that you are not able to grieve. Many spiritual directors advise, find a place where you can be alone. Kneel before a crucifix or an image of Archangel Michael, or even before a photo of the person you lost, and allow yourself to cry. Do not repress the tears, let them out. Cry for as long as needed. These dammed-up tears, when they finally come out, have an immense power of liberation for you and for the soul for whom you cry. And if this happens at Christmas, even if it seems out of place to others, know, for God and for that soul, it will be grace. Tears shed in specific places also have a special meaning. Tears in the cemetery, over the grave, tears during a Mass offered for the soul, tears shed before a nativity scene on Christmas night. All of this has a particular spiritual weight. In the cemetery, the symbolic connection with the body resting there makes the prayer more concrete. In Mass, your tears unite with the sacrifice of Christ. In Christmas Mass, then, this union gains a particular light. And Archangel Michael, defender of the celestial liturgy, is spiritually present when heaven touches earth at the altar. There is also talk of the last tears. At some point in life, you shed the last physical tear for that person on this earth. It can be after years or decades. The faith of the Church says that the soul is aware of this moment. It is like a delicate farewell. The soul recognizes, this was the last earthly tear for me, and thanks for each one shed throughout the years. And then comes a beautiful promise, which many saints devoted to Saint Michael repeat. On the day you die, when your soul leaves the body, one of the first things you will see will be all the souls for whom you cried coming to meet you. They will come with gratitude, joy, love. They will say, thank you for every tear. Thank you for not forgetting me. Thank you for loving me even after death. And they will accompany you, comfort you, help you in the passage from earth to eternity. And among them will be Archangel Michael, the one who fights for you, defending your soul and leading it to the light of God. Now I want to teach you a powerful prayer to be prayed when you are crying for someone who has passed away. A prayer that transforms your tears into a spiritual offering, sanctifies your crying, and multiplies the benefit for the soul for whom you cry, under the protection of Archangel Michael. Lord Jesus Christ, I offer to you these tears that I am shedding for the soul of Name. May every tear be a prayer. May every sigh be a plea. May every ache in the heart be an act of love. If this soul is in purgatory, may my tears be like fresh water, relieving its pains. If this soul is already in heaven, may my tears be like an offering of gratitude for its life and a plea for its intercession. I cry because I love. I cry because I miss. I cry because the absence hurts. But I trust that one day we will meet again, where there will be no more tears or separation, only eternal joy. Archangel Michael, Prince of the Celestial Militias, present these tears before God and guard the soul that I love. Amen. Whoever prays like this completely transforms the nature of crying. From a pain that could be just suffering, it also becomes prayer, suffrage, and powerful spiritual connection. There are still so many details that the faith of the Church, enlightened by St. Michael's mission, reminds us of. The unexpected tears in the middle of the day, which can be a call from the soul. The tears shed on the anniversary of death, when the veil between worlds seems to become thinner. The tears shed for people with whom we had difficult relationships, which become instruments of reconciliation. Even the tears of an entire people for someone who marked history, forming waves of grace over that soul. In all this, one truth remains. Your tears, shed with love, are not in vain. And at Christmas, when heaven approaches earth, when the child God rests in the nativity scene and Archangel Michael, Prince of the Celestial Armies, contemplates humanity with the gaze of a warrior and guardian, these tears gain even greater strength. Now, in the comments, I want you to do something very special. Write the name of someone who has passed away and for whom you still cry. Write, Archangel Michael, today I know that name feels my tears, and that is why I cry with hope, not with despair. If you wish, tell your story of loss. When you share the pain, you relieve your heart, and when other people read your story, they feel less alone. Let's create here in the comments a communion of people who understand the pain of loss, but who now have the hope and certainty that their tears do not fall into emptiness. Leave your like so that more people discover this comforting truth linked to Archangel Michael's mission. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to continue receiving messages of hope and faith that strengthen and comfort the heart. Share this video with someone who is going through grief, who has lost a loved one, who needs to hear that their tears have value, that their tears have power, that their tears create bridges between heaven and earth. And always remember, in heaven, when you finally reunite with all those you loved and lost in this life, one of the first things they will do is thank you for your tears, including those you shed on Christmas night. And beside them will be Archangel Michael, with his sword of light, witnessing that no tear of love was wasted, that all were seen, felt, welcomed. No tear of love falls into God's forgetfulness. And under the gaze of Archangel Michael, each one of them becomes a path of encounter. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen.